All right. Welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you and all the beauty queens that are listening. You guys are getting a firsthand experience with the one and only Tiffany Rogers, who is also Miss Virginia, Miss America, Virginia, Miss Virginia America. How do I say it?
Mrs. Virginia America. Yes.
There she is in all her glory. We're so excited to have you here. Not only is she a fellow friend, she's a sister in Christ. She is a fellow beauty queen. And I am just so grateful to kind of hear about her story as a mama journeying into this Mrs. Virginia role, but so much more than that, because she has just a heart of gold. And I am excited to hear about the community work that you do, the outpouring of servant leadership that you example to so many women. And we're just grateful to have you here. So thanks for being here, Tiffany.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
So tell us a bit about, like, I can kind of do your rap sheet, right? But I want to know, like, the heart of Tiffany, how you got into what you're doing today, and how we can kind of get into the backstory of who you are.
Okay. Well, it's actually been an amazing journey that I started back in 2018. Actually, my daughter, Noelle, actually inspired me to do my first pageant ever. I had never ever done a pageant. I always wanted to. It was always a dream of mine, but I just was like, no, not today. You know how we start putting off things, And so one day she came home off the bus and she was just like defeated. Like she was like crying and just having this very vulnerable moment. And she struggles with reading because of her dyslexia. So we always talk about, like, God gives us strengths and God gives us weaknesses, and we need to kind of amplify our strengths and know that our weaknesses are okay, and He gives us the grace to, get by day to day. Yeah. So I was just holding her little face in my hands, and I just said to her, like, we believe in you so much, but none of this matters if you don't believe in yourself. And I said, I need to know that you, Noelle, believe in yourself. And she's like, Mom, I totally believe in myself, but do you? Like, she kind of like flipped it on me.
Holy moly, we got a little psychologist on our hands.
Yes. And I was like, well, yeah, why would you say that? And she was like, Mom, you just do everything for everyone else all the time. But I believe you can do anything you want to do. So if there's something in you that you want to do, I think you should do it. It was kind of like this aha moment.
Holy cow. That's like straight from the voice of God, right? Coming through your baby girl.
Yes. And so it kind of like shook me a little bit, because I feel like I was, being a good wife and a good mom of 4 and helping my husband run his business. But at the end of the day, I didn't really have anything that just signed my name Tiffany to, something that I just do for me and to help other people or whatever. So I went to bed that night praying, God, what is it that you want me to do that scares me? Like, what should I do to kind of send myself into this like uncomfortable zone where we grow? Yeah. And I woke up the next morning and I just was like, I'm going to do a pageant. Like, I'm going to do the Mrs. Virginia pageant. And I just kind of thought it was crazy. What am I doing? But I signed up that day and I just kind of never looked back. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do it scared. It's just ironic because I don't even really like to be the center of attention. You know?
I love that so much. There's like so much goodness in so many parts of that story, both from like listening to our children and also understanding how they perceive us as women, as moms, as home, like coordinators, the home CEOs, right?
Right.
So incredible. One, that you then took what she said and then activated it. What a noble thing for her to be able to witness. One, that she was like a component of that catapult, but also to say, wow, mommy really hears me, like really truly hears me. And I think often when we're like in the midst of regularity and in the midst of a comfort zone, like you were saying, we don't often take that step back to analyze what we're doing on a day-to-day, because we do put our kids, we do put our husbands, we do put, especially from a monetary perspective, both of our husbands are entrepreneurs. They actually work in the same kind of field. Yeah. And so we know the importance of their role, and therefore we put them in that space, and that we kind of come second, not in a negative way, in an honoring way, right?
No.
So I just love that so much that she has that example. I'm curious. I'm sure she was like your biggest fan ever the entire time.
She was. And then I actually ended up getting first runner up that year. And I was blown away because I, one, had never done a pageant. Two, I was up there with Eileen Vega, Mrs. Virginia 2018, who had done a couple Mrs. Virginia pageants, and then she had been in pageantry her whole life. To be on that stage with her and holding her hand and kind of just like, when they called our names, just kind of like, you know, I was talking to her like, I'm so glad we're on this journey together, and just kind of being a cheerleader for her reign was really, really cool.
Wow. So I don't actually know like anything that goes into the back end of what you guys do to go through this process. I know it's a long journey. It's not just like you sign up and now you're on stage. I'd love to hear like, what was that like? And as you were journeying through that and stepping out of your comfort zone, especially not being like the typical, probably extrovert that you're alongside with a lot of pageant girls or women. Mm-hmm. Talked us through like, what was the psyche like? What was the mental health like and the spiritual journey as you were doing this?
Well, I definitely did rely on God every single day, because I feel like when we sign up to do something for the glory of the kingdom of God, the enemy will try to put roadblocks in our ways. And that's just how it is. And so, you know, of course, like just, you know, like I said, I woke up and I was like, I'm going to do this. But then the next day I was like, why did I do like, why did I sign up for this? Like, why am I putting myself out there? And so just kind of like working on the space between my two ears, which we all need to work on that headspace. And, you know, we just need to go forward and know that God will provide each and every day. And it doesn't matter the outcome of the exact pageant. It kind of is about the journey, which is, I kind of learned that, you know, walking through it. I actually ended up signing up to do the pageant in 2019. And for some reason, I just kind of felt this tug. It was like, Tiff, it's not your time, you know? And Carl, my husband, was, of course, my biggest cheerleader. And he's like, no, you still need to do it. You still need to do it. And I was like, I don't know. I just feel weird about this year. Like, I feel like it's just not my year for some reason. And he was still encouraging me. And then I think it was like a week later, he called me on the phone and he said, I signed up for this life coaching school in Austin. And he said with the tuition money that I can bring a guest with me to also get certified. And he said, do you want to come? And I was like, absolutely. I would love to go with you. And I said, when is it? And it was the exact same date of the 2019 pageant.
Wow.
So I, at that point, knew God was calling me into life coaching to prepare me for my reign as Mrs. Virginia 2020.
How amazing is that? That's so cool. So you go, you get this life coaching certification, and then you still felt prompted. You were like, this is something I really want to do. So you went forward, and then in the midst of COVID, you became this. Like, how did you still get to activate? So you just didn't have people in the crowd, but you still had to do all the fiduciary duties, right?
Right. So for the 2020 pageant, we were allowed to have a smaller audience at that point. But I kind of feel like God was just preparing me for this year, because it's not about the glitz and the glamour. It's never been about that for me. It's about sharing my heart, helping other women, helping other people. And I'm still able to promote my platform, Hope for Healing. Hope for Healing was kind of a journey that has come about over like a couple years span. And my mom actually was walking through breast cancer when I kind of was praying I was on my knees praying in my room. It was like the day before I found out that she was positive for breast cancer. And I was just praying and praying about, you know, I just felt unsettled, and God, just please be with her, you know, no matter what her journey is. And I opened my eyes and I was praying, and I saw this rainbow concentrated on my hand. And I just felt this peace come over me. And God was saying to me, she's going to be okay no matter what. But then the next morning I went with her and found out that she had breast cancer. So Hope for Healing is kind of a community out for just people that are suffering. And I have done suffering, been through suffering in my own life, postpartum anxiety and depression. And I was diagnosed with a chronic disease that actually been able to overcome through my faith. And so Hope for Healing was kind of just, if you look at my emblem, it's the prayer hands and the 4 awareness ribbons that kind of have personally affected my life. And
Wow.
so I feel like through my reign in 2020, COVID is crazy right now. People are on edge. People need help. I've partnered with Runway to Life, which is it's based out of Richmond. It's a nonprofit, and they work with people to bring awareness to mental health and suicide prevention. So I'm able to, through an online support group, I help formulate that for them. And now I post in the overcoming postpartum anxiety and depression group for them. So I feel like this year has been a year of just God has been telling me, you have to create it, and it's not glamorous. But remember, Jesus was born in a manger, and that was one of the most important events that has ever happened. And it wasn't glamorous, but I feel like sometimes in the trenches where it's not pretty, that's where the most important work is done.
Yeah, that's such a good word for so many reasons. And I'm thinking of you and like the difference that what probably would have been to be in this quote unquote reign when public events were still happening and all of this would have been going on that didn't necessarily happen. And yet you still were pursuing actually the true mission that you had, not only in the first time signing up, that there was more of this kingdom impact, this outreach program, these healing opportunities that you wanted to be a part of, rather than just showing up and showcasing a crown, right? Like it really gives God the glory. So it's almost like he paved the way for you to have this experience in this specific season versus 2019 versus 2018. And yet, like you said at the very beginning, it's all about this process. And so I love that you leaned into that and are still like activated in that space. You guys, I hope you hear like the value of really understanding your testimony and knowing that God uses every single piece for good, and every trial point is an opportunity for you to then transition into the truth for other people to have that healing as well. So Tiffany, that's so honorable. It's like, so you're always been this like calm, like sweet natured, like woman that I've just admired, especially as a mother. And we have kiddos the same age. So there's that as well. But I feel like this is life coaching. This experience of what you've gone through is truly like the next season, right? So like if you fast forward and you're like, what am I going to do after this? Do you see yourself still in the pageantry setting or transitioning more into your nonprofit work?
So I actually have been thinking about that a little bit because my reign as Mrs. Virginia will be over in May. And I don't know the answer to that 100%. I always thought that this was a bucket list thing for me, that I was going to do one pageant and, accomplish that goal and help other people during my reign and then be done with the pageant side of it. So I believe it might be my last pageant, the Mrs. America pageant that's coming up. Who knows, because I'm open to whatever God called me to do. I can't really say either way, but in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, I've checked that box. I'm so happy to be Mrs. Virginia 2020, and I will still continue Hope for Healing's work after. Just like I was doing Hope for Healing's work before my reign. Right. I just wasn't really sharing it on social media. With pageants, you always share, and you kind of like want to help motivate people to kind of find their own niche and kind of reach out and help others in their own ways.
So let's take it like way back, right? Like, so this all is like 2018 perspective. I want to know the Tiffany that like pre-kids, pre-Carl, like what were you like growing up, and like where did you see yourself going and leading? Like what direction of life and wholeness? Because how long were you in your faith? Like give us the backstory.
So I was raised in the faith. My parents were both Catholic. I was always raised in the church. But when I've just always known Jesus as my savior. But I feel like sometimes we have questions in our mind and things like that. So I went through a period of like questioning my faith and things like that. And then God kind of has drawn me back. But I have just seen God work in so many different ways in my life that 110% I know that he's real and working and alive. So I have no questions anymore. But I feel like for those who might be out there and they're struggling with their faith because of hard times or, certain things in the world, just please know that he's still there, even in the hard times. That's just when we are growing the most. And he always brings darkness into light, and he will turn your hardships and your struggles into something good eventually. So I just want people to know to take hope.
I love that so much. And it's so necessary for people to have that. And like you said, the parallel of timing on what it is right now, where people are feeling that isolation and that distance. When, because you don't practice Catholicism now, correct? You guys are in a more non-denominational church.
Yes, we go to Trinity, Princess
Trinity,
Anne.
that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me about like that transition. Was it after you were in that kind of questioning state that did you go to different types of churches? How did you go about that process? Because I think a lot of people feel like because of what they were rooted in and the learning of faith or religion when they were younger, it's the only thing, right? And there's the only one lens. So how did you end up discovering different lenses of your faith?
Okay, well, I have great respect for the Catholic Church, and I was actually still going to the Catholic Church when I was pregnant with my last son. So he's only 4 years old, so it was about 4 years ago. And I would wake up every single morning and go to church, the Catholic Church, early in the morning. I like that they have, hours that are different from other churches, and you can always go. They're open every day. But what happened was, me and my husband were having a conversation, and I said, babe, I just want us to be on the same page with our faith, because he was great. He was Catholic, and then he grew up in like a non-denominational, Lutheran, and then non-denominational church. So we were kind of just trying to figure out, like, what do we want to be as far as where do we want to be our family? And he just kind of said to me, I don't know if I want to go through the whole process of becoming Catholic, because I feel like I really want to go to a church where the pastor can be married and they understand, like, just because they live that family unit, like, the things that we go through as married people. And, when our kids are having issues, or, just when life happens, he really wanted to be involved in a church that was, had Jesus at the center, but also had that aspect of, if we ever needed to go to the pastor, like, they would truly, like, maybe understand exactly what we were experiencing.
That's really good. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that. It's interesting. I love that.
Yeah, so my daughter Noelle is friends with her little friend Lucy, wanted to have a sleepover. And Pastor Art is the pastor over at Trinity, and that's Lucy's dad. And basically, I said, we would love to have Lucy over for a sleepover. And Lucy's mom said, well, we have church tomorrow, so I don't know if it's going to happen. And I was like, well, we'll just bring her to your church and we'll check it out. And that's where we've just been, because we fell in love. So it kind of was Lucy kind of leading us to Trinity, and we just
That's awesome. Now, that's like a big difference, right? Like there's like a pretty big difference in like the process and even just the time frame that you're sitting in church. And how did your spirit, like, how did you feel? Was it an immediately like, wow, this is like such a difference. This is home. It's so interesting that we're having this conversation, because I just had this whole conversation with my mom on yesterday morning, about her going and experiencing a funeral in the Catholic faith. I think the same church that you might have been going to, and just her lens and her perspective of this ceremony versus what she was used to growing up. So I think it's a valid conversation that doesn't happen very often, especially in public. And so thank you for being vulnerable and also still honoring, because I know that that's important to you, especially for your parents.
Right. And I, like I said, I still love the traditions of the Catholic Church. The difference between the church, the Catholic Church and Trinity really is like the music aspect. I'm so moved by music.
Yeah.
And half the time I just sit there and just cry. Like I sing and I cry and I cry, and I don't know what it is, but I mean, if I hear kids singing, I'm crying. And it just, the music really moves me at this church. And I just love the pastor, Pastor Randy, Pastor Art. They've been really amazing. But again, St. John's has been good too. It's just, I wanted us to experience church as a family and for everyone to be on the same page. So that's
I love that so much. Thank you for sharing. It's so funny because we can get into these conversations. And I was telling Tiffany right before we get on the show that like, I don't prep people. I'm just like, hey, come on, let's just enjoy a conversation together. It's in the afternoon and I can't drink coffee in the afternoon, but I always say it's like a coffee conversation.
Yes.
And so it's one of those times where you don't know where the conversation is going to lead. But the fact that there was like that moment that happened yesterday, and then my church experience yesterday, and then this conversation today, it's like, it's so purpose, it's so ordained. So you actually said that there's been a lot of that has happened just in the last couple months where you're just like adamant. You're like, I see God so predominantly. You want to like give us a bit of a peek into what those experiences have been like?
Yeah, I mean, some of them are really personal, but just, I mean, even in like, I'm sure you've seen it with your husband's business, how sometimes when one door closes, God will just fling open other doors. And sometimes we're mourning the door that closed and we're like, what's going on here? So, you know, in business for my husband, just in my life coaching business, people reaching out more and just wanting help. I think COVID maybe had a lot to do with that as well. But also through the Runway to Life, which I was telling you about, I'm actually seeing Runway to Life. It's a nonprofit, but it actually, if you look closely, it's a ministry. There are so many people being, delivered from depression and anxiety and thoughts of suicide and coming to the Lord and really finding peace in the Lord through Runway to Life. So just being involved in that and kind of hearing the stories going on behind the scenes has been absolutely, mind blowing. So so many ways. Through my children's lives, and they're at a new school this year because of COVID, and we weren't sure how that was going to go, and we really needed our daughter to be at a school like in person for the way she learns, and just seeing the blessings come out of that has been really cool. And I don't think that we would have ever thought about private school if COVID did not happen. So especially in middle school for girls, I have to say, like, I was like on my knees praying about, God, where do we put her in middle school? Like, what are we going to do? And I've just seen like her relationship with her friends blooming and girls uplifting other girls. And it's just been really, really amazing. So
that is incredible and very different than my middle school experience. Actually, you are assuming you know Sean Thompson Durr because she knows you, and she's like two great women. So
is she watching?
She is.
Oh, I love her.
She's amazing. I haven't got to connect with her as an adult, but she was my fourth grade most favorite ever teacher. And when I jumped into middle school, which is what we were talking about in the perfect segue, I was really bullied. And even though I still had like a good group of friends and I still pursued the things that I loved, there was like this wrestling that was always happening. And I actually recently started working out with one of the gals who was quote unquote somebody who bullied me. And I remember seeing her at 5 a.m. walking in, you're kind of already in a vulnerable state. Like you're like just like barely brushed teeth coming into the gym. Like no one's paying attention to who I am. And I saw her and I was like, oh, like my heart started to race. I remember like all the emotions that occurred when that happened. And then I thought to myself, what a circle of life that we're standing right next to each other in a same season, same age, doing the exact same thing, bettering our bodies, bettering our well-being, and still like similar stature differences. And I was just like, oh my goodness. And so a couple of days later, it took me actually a little bit of time to actually be like, hey, how's it going? Like, remember me?
Remember me?
Yeah. And so I just believe that, even in the middle school, even in that process of evolution, that there are so many safe harbors too, that we as moms have not only a responsibility, but an opportunity to stand alongside them. But it circles back so beautifully to the heart that you've instilled in Noelle to be able to boldly walk into that process, because transitioning schools is also a scary thing. Being in a virtual setting, like so many kids are and parents are experiencing, that's also overwhelming. So there's just been a lot within COVID that I really believe there are so many gifts within it, depending on that perspective. And if you're sitting in the midst of depression and anxiety, holy moly, I've seen the negative effects that it's had. It's very hard. I mean, we've seen suicide rates, divorce rates, all of this stuff transition. So as a life coach, when you're having these conversations with people, like what area, because there's so many different styles and genres of life coaching and business coaching even, what is like your heartbeat towards that? Is it really attacking those mindsets and things first, or?
Right. Yeah. So the limiting beliefs, and all of that. But I think too, I went to IPEC training. And so I don't know if you're familiar with IPEC, but
I'm not.
They have the philosophy that like every person knows exactly what they need in life. You might just not know the questions to find the answers. So my job really as a life coach is to ask people the hard questions, and they come up with the answers on their own, and they have these like incredible aha moments.
Wow.
Like when I was being trained in Austin, I remember having a 5-minute, it only took 5 minutes coaching session with one of my peers. And, even though I was honored to be first runner up, I still had questions of like, what I feel like as women we do, what should I have done better? Or what could I have done better? And I kind of was like ruminating on this whole thought that I could have done something better in the first pageant I was in, even though I gave it my all. And it was just, I feel like in pageantry, it's just whoever God ordains for that year. Any of those women on stage, like the year that I won, the year Eileen won, the year that Lisa won, could have done the job. It's just who does God have in store for that year and to serve his purpose, and we all serve our purpose that weekend during the pageant, no matter what. I believe that. But anyway, so this 5-minute coaching session, and I ended up realizing that the whole time I was ruminating on that one, what could I have done better, instead of like hundreds of things that I've done at my reign in Mrs. Virginia Beach where I was successful. And I actually remember you, Tamra. I wrote a post or something kind of just like very like raw, and you were like, you have touched so many lives, and it was kind of the same thing that you had said to me. And I'm like, wow. And I'll never forget the words that you said, because it really helped me get through that time. Because I feel like when we're doing something that we're so passionate about and maybe we don't place as well as we want, we can kind of have that crash, like we're proud of ourselves, but then we're like, what could I have done better? And you really helped me get through that day and that week. So,
I love that so much. And it's so crazy because like the algorithm, right? Like you never know what's going to happen. I never know. It's not like I see every single post that you make. And I honestly think that God has so much more at hand in social media and all this virtual experience than we could possibly ever know. I always say like Jesus is my algorithm because ultimately like he's the one that like puts the opportunities in front of us. He's the one who ordains the time for each of us individually, and it's all working together for his greater purpose, his greater plan. And I think even people who you said that like you had all these open doors and all these opportunities with new people coming in need of life coaching, had you not like pursued what was inside of your gut and your heart of hearts at the time to say, I don't think this year is for me, you wouldn't have been at that school, which then wouldn't have led to the opportunities of people coming into community with you in this way. So it's just, it's really stewarding what the Holy Spirit is depositing into us. And so you mentioned earlier, like your prayer, you mentioned earlier music and worship. I'm curious, like in your intimacy with God, like what additional things do you do to safe harbor your faith and maybe even within your home and then your pursuit of being in a pageant?
Well, right now, I just feel like my prayer life, like trying to just include God in my prayer life every single day or every single need. There's so many times in our lives where we're trying to solve problems on our own. And what we don't realize is that when we like bow down our heads and honor God and pray about it, he is out there fighting our battles for us. And half the time we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulder when really we need to be just giving it to God. So that's what I've been really doing. But my prayer, for my reign and thereafter is just to be his hands and feet and for him to show me what he wants me to do with my life and just honoring his purpose for me and how can I help other people through him. So that's pretty much it.
It's so beautiful, but that's a huge call. That's a huge like prayer, even to be, a vessel that he can just steward well, and us just staying as close as we possibly can in that process of learning and him opening the doors and closing the other ones, just like you mentioned. I'm curious when you're in the pageant world, because I feel a lot of times, and I used to watch them a lot, and I haven't as much since being an adult, but it feels like it's very faith filled. And that's not a, what's the word I'm looking for? something that you have to come in to be in the pageant world. And so, but do you find like a lot of the women were in their faith?
I do. I've seen so many women, that have won the pageant that have been Christians or, faith-based in some way. And I just think it's really awesome that God is using people, and he's using pageantry, to help other people. So that's really what it's about.
Yeah, it's really cool. It reminds me so much of obviously the story of Esther, and I'm sure you guys might have even studied that in that process, right? There's so many parallels to being the one who is chosen in that regard. But I love that you showcased that raw, that feeling, that emotion, that doubt, even that you didn't do enough. And I think as women specifically, and I wonder, I need to I have guys on the podcast all the time, but I need to ask them, like, do they ever not feel enough? Do they ever not feel worthy? And I'm sure they do, but they don't showcase it in the same way. We have comparison. Then we have our own self-doubt that actually can be so crippling towards what God has in store for us. It's like he's got this beautiful package. He wants you to open it and you're like, oh, I just can't. There's just something keeping you back from like the fullness of who he is and the fullness of his promise. So as you step into like this next season, not really knowing after this happened, after May, and you're passing the crown, right? Like what this next season looks like, other than still, following in line with the testimonies and the pieces of your heart that you want to continue to showcase. What advice can you give in stepping out in fear? Because it's exactly what you did when you woke up that morning and were like, I'm doing this. Fear might be in the way, but I'm not going to let it stop me.
Just do it scared, and just know that every single day that you're trying and you keep going, God is going to direct your path. He's going to go before you. He's going to open the right doors. He's going to close the right doors. And I'm so thankful, because looking back on my life, I can see the doors that God has closed. And I feel like it's always for protection. It wasn't for me. And that's my prayer for everyone, is that God opens the correct doors for you and he slams the doors that aren't meant for you shut, and sometimes that seems hard when it's something that you think that you really want, but sometimes the truth of the matter is it's not for you.
That's so good.
We
got people on who are like, say that again. That's so good.
Also, I think what you're talking about for men, I feel like men aren't as vulnerable because they see it as a sign of weakness, where I feel like when we talk about the true, honest, hard, in the mud stuff, I feel like that gives us freedom, and it's empowering, and it brings confidence. So I always just want to be real with people, 100% real, So
this morning I was on a call with a guy who actually said this past year of his life, he's just literally catapulted into this understanding of who God is. And in his faith, he was able to, through faith, he's done a bajillion 12-step programs. He was able to release alcoholism that had blanketed his life for so long just by coming to know Jesus more intimately. He got married during that season. He moved across country. He got a new job. Like, in the blink of an eye, in the middle of COVID. And I just believe that like it's a matter, and his response was that it was all through submission, but he said the words, authenticity extends to authority. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so good. Because it's just this freedom factor to be fully you and not let a bully, not let anybody keep you back from his promises, but the identity that he sees in you. And that's like the most beautiful thing, is because we can stand in the mirror and feel not enough. But if we stand within his beautiful adoration, just like us as moms who see our babies in all of their perfection, in no matter what, like we see, and then we know that they have their weaknesses just like we all do, but we just idolize them. We just honor them. We can't get enough of their sweetness. That's how he feels about us as his children. And so I just want to say thank you for the authenticity, because I've seen the evolution of that in you, and you being more vocal and more transparent. And I know that it's just blessing so many people.
Thank you. And I think it's too, like, getting in the word and just knowing what God has to say about us, because the world can be harsh sometimes, to be honest. Whenever you put yourself out there, you're going to have criticism. You're going to have people come against you, especially if you're doing kingdom work. That's just the nature of it. And just knowing like, well, I'm not perfect, but God says I'm this, and that, and I'm amazing. And I have grace because he gives me grace, and I can stay the course because he's directing my steps. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm curious because you being in your faith and just being I always think of the word noble when I think of you. And it's like, when you were growing up and even walking into this season, did you feel like you had to change your circle of influence at all, or that there have been people or relationships that you feel like you've had to shed in the process of like becoming and even being in your faith the way that you are?
I mean, I feel like whenever we walk through life, there's always going to be friendships that are for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And it's just, praying about the wisdom to know, the people that, maybe aren't there for your next step. It doesn't mean that you don't love them. You can love them from afar, but sometimes that does have to happen, where it's like, okay, well, I'm just not feeling like, or maybe it's like it could be even growing separate ways, and that's okay. But I mean, just, praying for the wisdom to know like who's coming to your next location and who's not. But then also I would say that I don't have any enemies in my life. Like, even if there's been disagreements, I always wish them well. I pray for people, and I come from a place of love. And it doesn't mean that, just because two people have a disagreement doesn't mean that you can't love from afar, and wish them the best. It just doesn't mean, sometimes it just means they're not coming with you to the next place, and that's okay. And I feel like people we meet are just, it's just a part of our story, and I don't know. That's all.
It's so good. And it's like, people will deposit certain things and you take that with you or you leave it be. But I think that that's a really beautiful way of showcasing like that season, a reason, or a lifetime. And I love that little nugget right there. I think it's really good and something to think about even for not just people, but things, right? And I say things, I don't mean like a tangible thing, but I mean, opportunities, I mean, experiences, I mean, jobs, I mean, health situations that happen. And knowing that even in those situations that feel like a crisis, and inclusive of what happened with your mom, what's the finale of that story? How is she today?
So she's doing so well. She's cancer free now. Thank God. She just is, it's after you've been through a year-long battle and she did chemo and all that. So she did, she lost her hair and her hair's starting to grow back. It's so pretty. She'll learn her wig, because she likes the long hair, but she's doing a lot better. It's just like getting her strength back, and she's getting it back a little bit more every day. So we're really thankful that she's getting back to normal. So
that's amazing. I love that so much. We have to end on a high note, y'all. This is so good. I am so grateful for you, Tiffany. I love your transparency. You guys, please connect with Tiffany. Where do you hang out the most on social media or anything like that? Website?
On Facebook, I'm Tiffany Rogers, and on Instagram, I'm Time with Tiffany.
Nice. You guys is both tagged in the links here of the show. Please get in touch with her, follow along with her journey, see what's next in her reign. But more so importantly, it's a lifetime, right? And so you always have a crown in our eyes. We're so grateful for everything that you're putting out into the community, for the Jesus that you follow and the Jesus that you leave everywhere you go.
Thank you so much for having me. And you have been so inspiring to me over the years too. I want you to know that I've loved watching your journey as well. So thank you so much.
We're in this together, sister.
Yes.
Spread that joy.
That's true. It's so good to talk with you.
You too, friend. All right, you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Touch base with Tiffany. See you soon.
Thank you.